The morning sun had barely crept over the manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates when Mark Thompson's world came crashing down, quite literally. He stood in stunned silence, his work-roughened hands clenched into fists, staring at the flattened remains of what had been his meticulously maintained storage shed. Where wooden walls and a carefully constructed roof once stood, only a pile of splintered lumber and twisted metal remained, crushed as if by some merciless giant. Mark's mind raced back to the previous evening. Nothing had suggested the impending destruction. The neighborhood had been quiet, peaceful, too peaceful, as it turned out. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association had struck without warning, without courtesy, without even the basic decency of a formal notice. His shed wasn't just any ordinary storage space. It was a testament to years of hard work and careful planning. Mark had built it himself during weekends, carefully selecting each piece of lumber, ensuring every nail was perfectly placed. It housed his late father's woodworking tools, family heirlooms passed down through generations, and countless memories that now lay in a heartbreaking heap of destruction. The shed had stood on his property for 7 years, 7 years during which no complaint had ever been filed, no violation notice ever issued. Mark had always been a model homeowner, meticulously maintaining his property, paying his HOA dues on time, and participating in community events. He'd even served on the neighborhood welcome committee for 3 years, greeting new residents with homemade cookies and genuine warmth. Yet here he was, facing complete disregard for his property rights. As neighbors began to emerge from their homes, casting curious glances and whispering behind cupped hands, Mark's initial shock transformed into a simmering rage. Sarah Mitchell, from 2 doors down, approached cautiously, her face a mixture of sympathy and nervous energy. "I can't believe they did this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No warning, no communication. Mark's response was measured, but the steel in his voice was unmistakable. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." He pulled out his phone and began documenting everything. Photographs of the destroyed shed, the scattered tools, the precise location where the structure had stood. Each click of the camera was a step towards justice, a digital declaration of his intention to fight back. The HOA had made a critical mistake. They had not just destroyed a simple storage shed. They had attacked Mark's sense of security, his personal space, his very right to enjoy his own property. What they saw as a minor infraction, he viewed as a fundamental violation of his rights as a homeowner. Little did the Willow Creek HOA know, Mark Thompson was not just any homeowner. A former corporate lawyer who had stepped away from a high-stress legal world to enjoy a quieter life, he still possessed a razor-sharp legal mind and an unwavering determination to right wrongs. This was going to be a battle, and Mark was prepared to fight it with every legal tool at his disposal. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association headquarters was a pristine 2-story building that looked more like a corporate office than a neighborhood management center. Mark walked through the glass doors precisely at 9:00 a.m., a meticulously prepared folder tucked under his arm. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a facade of practiced neutrality, looked up with a rehearsed smile. "I need to speak with the board president," Mark stated, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of determination. Within minutes, Harold Bennett emerged, a portly man in his mid-60s, wearing an expensive pinstripe suit that screamed old money entitlement. Bennett's reputation preceded him. Mark knew he was a man who had built his career on bureaucratic bullying, someone who believed rules were absolute and homeowners were mere subjects to be controlled. "Mr. Thompson," Bennett began, gesturing to a small conference room, "I assume this is about the unauthorized structure we removed from your property." Mark chose his words carefully. "Unauthorized. That shed stood on my property for 7 years. It was professionally constructed, met all local building codes, and was never previously challenged." Bennett's smile was patronizing. Our bylaws are clear. Any external structure requires explicit board approval. The shed was in violation of Section 4.2 of our community guidelines. Mark pulled out photographs, architectural plans, and a meticulously researched timeline. Show me where in the bylaws it states that a pre-existing structure, maintained for 7 years without previous complaint, can be summarily destroyed without notice. The board president's composure flickered. Mark could see the momentary uncertainty in his eyes, a man unused to being challenged so directly. "We'll discuss compensation," Bennett said finally, clearly hoping to end the conversation quickly. "We'll offer you $500 for the removal." Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. The shed alone cost over $3,000 to build, not to mention the irreplaceable tools and personal items destroyed. My father's entire woodworking collection, gone in moments. As the conversation continued, Mark realized this was about more than just a shed. It was about power. The HOA had grown accustomed to wielding absolute control, crushing homeowner resistance with bureaucratic intimidation. But Mark was different. He understood their tactics, knew their weaknesses. Before leaving, he served Bennett with a formal notice of intent to pursue legal action. The words were measured, professional, but carried the weight of an impending storm. Outside, the manicured landscape of Willow Creek Estates seemed to mock him, a pristine facade hiding a system of petty tyranny. Mark knew the real battle was just beginning. The HOA might control the neighborhood, but he would make them understand they didn't own justice. His phone buzzed. It was his old law school friend, Elena Rodriguez, now a formidable civil rights attorney. "I heard what happened," she said. "Sounds like you might need some legal firepower." Mark's lips curved into a determined smile. "More than might," he replied. "I definitely do." The legal preparation consumed the next 3 weeks of Mark's life. Elena Rodriguez proved to be more than just a casual ally. She was a strategic powerhouse. Her office became a war room filled with stacks of documents, photographs, and meticulously annotated HOA bylaws. "They've done this before," Elena revealed during one late-night strategy session, spreading out a series of case files. Willow Creek HOA has a history of aggressive property interventions. Most homeowners simply back down, intimidated by legal costs and bureaucratic complexity. Mark studied the documents carefully. Previous victims had been isolated, treated as individual cases, but Elena was seeing a pattern, a systematic approach of harassment and property overreach that had gone unchallenged for years. Their strategy began to take shape. It wasn't just about Mark's shed anymore. This had become about holding the HOA accountable for years of unchecked power. Local property records revealed a shocking truth. Over the past decade, the HOA had destroyed or forcibly modified at least 12 homeowners' external structures, often with minimal justification. Most had been small improvements: gardening sheds, children's playhouses, decorative gazebos. Each destruction had been swift, merciless, and seemingly designed to break the spirit of community residents. Elena brought in a private investigator, a grizzled former police detective named Jack Reyes. His initial research uncovered something even more intriguing. Harold Bennett, the HOA board president, had personal financial connections with a local construction and demolition company that frequently won contracts for property correction in the neighborhood. "Follow the money," Jack muttered, spreading photographs and financial records across the conference table. "Bennett isn't just enforcing rules, he's profiting from them." The lawsuit they were preparing would be multifaceted. Beyond the direct damages from Mark's destroyed shed, they were building a case of systematic organizational misconduct. Elena drafted initial legal documents that would make most HOA board members break into a cold sweat. Mark's neighborhood began to take notice. Whispers turned into conversations. Homeowners who had previously suffered in silence now reached out, sharing their own stories of HOA overreach. Sarah Mitchell from next door became an unexpected ally. She arrived one evening with a USB drive containing documentation of her own previous conflicts with the HOA, incidents she had previously been too afraid to challenge. "I always thought I was alone," she admitted, her hands trembling slightly. "Seeing you stand up to them, it gives me hope." The legal team worked tirelessly. Depositions were prepared, expert witnesses identified, financial records subpoenaed. What had started as a personal fight over a destroyed shed was transforming into a potential landmark case about homeowner rights. Elena looked at Mark one evening, a mix of professional admiration and personal respect in her eyes. Most people would have accepted the $500 and walked away. You're choosing to fight not just for yourself, but for an entire community. Mark's response was simple and resolute. Someone has to. The lawsuit was about to be filed. The Willow Creek HOA had no idea what was coming. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker of tension. Mark sat beside Elena, his posture calm, but his eyes razor sharp. Across the room, Harold Bennett and the HOA's legal team looked distinctly uncomfortable. Their usual armor of bureaucratic invincibility had been stripped away, revealing the vulnerability beneath. Judge Margaret Holloway was no nonsense. Her reputation for fairness balanced with an absolute intolerance for institutional bullying. She had reviewed the extensive documentation, financial records, testimony from multiple homeowners, and the detailed timeline of the HOA's actions. Elena's opening statement was a masterpiece of legal precision. "This is not about a simple shed," she declared, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. "This is about a pattern of systematic harassment, financial impropriety, and the calculated destruction of homeowners' property rights." The evidence was damning. Jack Reyes's investigation had uncovered a web of financial connections that went far beyond simple HOA management. Bennett had been receiving kickbacks from the demolition company for years. Each forcibly removed structure meant another contract, another payment, another opportunity for personal gain. Witnesses told their stories. Sarah Mitchell trembled as she recounted how the HOA had threatened her with fines when she tried to plant a small vegetable garden in her backyard. An elderly couple described how they had been forced to remove a wheelchair ramp for their disabled son, claiming it didn't meet aesthetic standards. Bennett's testimony was a disaster. Under cross-examination, he became increasingly agitated, his carefully cultivated image of professional composure crumbling. Elena systematically dismantled his credibility, revealing inconsistencies in the HOA's documentation and exposing the financial motivations behind their aggressive actions. The turning point came when financial records showed a pattern of selective enforcement. Wealthy homeowners with connections to the board seemed to escape the same stringent rules that were ruthlessly applied to others. Mark's shed destruction was just one example of a much larger system of institutional corruption. During a recess, Mark overheard Bennett's lawyers discussing a potential settlement. The HOA was beginning to realize the full extent of their vulnerability. What they had assumed would be a quick, decisive action had turned into a potential legal nightmare. Judge Holloway's questions were pointed, her skepticism evident. "Mr. Bennett," she asked during one particularly tense moment, "can you explain why a 7-year-old structure was suddenly deemed an immediate threat requiring summary destruction?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mark thought about his father's tools, about the memories destroyed in moments of bureaucratic vindictiveness. This was no longer just about compensation. It was about accountability, about proving that no institution was above the law. As the day's proceedings concluded, Elena leaned over to Mark. "We've got them," she whispered, a rare smile breaking through her professional demeanor. "They know it, and we know it." The lawsuit had become more than a personal battle. It was now a beacon of hope for an entire community tired of unchecked institutional power. The media descended like a flock of hungry birds. What had begun as a local dispute had transformed into a landmark case about homeowner rights and institutional accountability. Local news channels ran lead stories about Mark Thompson's lawsuit, with investigative reports digging deeper into the Willow Creek HOA's questionable practices. 2 weeks after the explosive court proceedings, the pressure began to show. Harold Bennett resigned from the HOA board, effective immediately. The accompanying press release was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Everyone knew the truth. He had been forced out. Mark's phone rang constantly. Homeowners from across the county, some from as far as 3 states away, reached out with their own stories of HOA overreach. Elena's law firm was inundated with potential cases, each one revealing a similar pattern of institutional bullying. The financial impact on the HOA was immediate and severe. An emergency board meeting, called to address the mounting crisis, revealed the full extent of their vulnerability. Their insurance rates had skyrocketed. Potential board members were now hesitant to serve, fearing personal legal repercussions. Sarah Mitchell, emboldened by Mark's stand, began organizing a neighborhood committee dedicated to reviewing and challenging HOA bylaws. What was once a community ruled by fear was slowly transforming into a model of collective advocacy. The lawsuit's most significant victory came in an unexpected form. The local county commission began a comprehensive review of HOA regulations inspired by the revelations from Mark's case. They proposed new legislation that would provide stronger protections for homeowners, limiting the arbitrary power of homeowners associations. During a community meeting, Mark stood before a packed room of supporters and interested residents. This was never about winning, he told them, his voice steady. This was about justice, about protecting our homes, our rights, our community. Elena Rodriguez stood beside him, a quiet smile of satisfaction on her face. The legal victory was complete, but the real win was something more profound, a fundamental shift in how community governance could work. The demolished shed, the catalyst for everything, had become something of a local symbol. Photographs of its destruction were now Exhibit A in discussions about homeowner rights. Mark had even kept a small piece of the original lumber, a reminder of where this journey began. Yet the most poignant moment came unexpectedly. Mark's elderly neighbor, who had watched the entire saga unfold, approached him after the community meeting. "Your father would have been proud," she said, touching his arm. "You fought for something bigger than just a shed. You fought for dignity." As the sun set on Willow Creek Estates, it illuminated a neighborhood forever changed. The manicured lawns and identical houses now represented something different, not a landscape of enforced conformity, but a community that had learned the power of standing together. 2 years had passed since the landmark lawsuit. Mark Thompson's life had changed in ways he could never have anticipated that morning when he first discovered his shed destroyed. The financial settlement was substantial, far more than the initial $500 the HOA had carelessly offered. But money was the least of the victories. Mark used a portion of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for homeowners facing unreasonable HOA actions. Elena Rodriguez managed the fund, providing pro bono legal consultations and support to those who felt powerless against institutional overreach. Willow Creek Estates had transformed. The new HOA board, elected through a transparent process with input from residents, operated with a completely different philosophy. Quarterly town halls became a norm, with open discussions about community rules and regulations. Transparency replaced intimidation. Mark's original shed was rebuilt, this time with the full blessing of the community. He designed it as a community workshop, a space where neighbors could come together, share tools, and support one another. His father's woodworking tools, carefully restored, became the heart of this new communal space. Sarah Mitchell, inspired by the lawsuit, had become a local community organizer. She worked closely with county commissioners to draft new legislation protecting homeowner rights, ensuring that the lessons learned from Mark's fight would have a lasting impact beyond Willow Creek Estates. During a local television interview, Mark reflected on the journey. "It was never about winning," he said, a familiar phrase that had become something of a local motto. It was about standing up, about showing that one person can make a difference when they're willing to fight for what's right. The lawsuit had become a case study in legal circles, taught in property law classes as an example of grassroots resistance to institutional overreach. Law students would study how a single homeowner's determination could challenge an entire system. Harold Bennett, the former HOA president, had disappeared from public life. Rumors suggested he was facing multiple investigations related to his previous financial dealings. The mighty had fallen, brought down by their own hubris. On the anniversary of the lawsuit's resolution, the community gathered in the park. Mark was presented with a Community Service Award, but he insisted on sharing the moment with Elena, Jack Reyes, and Sarah, the people who had stood with him when it mattered most. As the sun set on Willow Creek Estates, the neighborhood looked different. No longer a landscape of fear and conformity, it had become a testament to the power of community, justice, and individual courage. Mark looked at the rebuilt shed, part memorial, part community center, and smiled. Some battles are worth fighting, not for victory, but for the change they bring.